Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we're going to talk about working with sponsored programs for grant support. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. One thing I have to report is we finished watching the show Bones. We got through all 12 seasons.
Jeez, dude, that's a time commitment. Holy moly.
I know. Well, we kind of thought it was, an infinite amount of episodes when we thought, 12 seasons. But now here we are at the end. And yeah, it feels weird to not be going back into that world again with those characters. Kind of like, finishing a book or something, but 12 seasons. So
I get very emotionally dependent on certain shows. Like, and then when you get to the end, it's like, because I think I've talked about on here, and there is a connection here, because like one of my big comfort shows is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, especially the first 3 seasons. But David Boreanaz is a big character in that.
Yes.
And we recently, it's like sort of break glass in case of emergency, but we're like, get Buffy out. Like, things are getting pretty stressful. We need to watch that again.
We need to calm down. Let's get Buffy. Totally.
Yeah. So what's your next adventure going to be?
Great question. Well, we were thinking about Buffy. We've kind of decided that we're going to try, there's a few shows that we've wondered if they're interesting, and we'll just check them out before committing to, another 12 seasons of something.
I know, it's a big one.
I know. I didn't realize the time was passing, and then suddenly.
Have you watched
seasons.
Firefly?
Oh, I love Firefly.
Oh, dude. It's
One
so
season,
good.
excellent season.
I know, and perfection. Just total perfection.
Yeah, totally.
That's another one. But I'm very uptight about it. Like, we can't watch it too regularly because I don't want to cheapen it and make it too, you know what I mean? So it has to be in special occasions. But those special occasions seem to come up pretty, they're not too far between. So, yeah.
Oh, special occasion, time for Firefly. I like it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What about you? How was your week?
My week was good. My eldest daughter had a birthday. And so me and Eric do this thing that I'm sure to anybody else is so weird, but we're just constantly like, can you believe she's 8? I can't believe she's 8. How could she be 8? Like, that's literally all we do for like the weeks coming up to it. But every time we record a podcast episode, I'm like, episode 25, that's amazing. How can it be episode 25? So I'm just constantly surprised but it's so weird with her birthday, because it feels like it should be either much shorter, like we just took her home from the hospital, or so much longer, because it feels like a million years ago. Because when she was born, we lived in Ireland and had no intention of emigrating, and I wasn't really going to be a professor, and so it's like a different world.
Yeah. Wow.
We had a blast. We went to the lagoon. I have weird patches of sunburn again. One is like a triangle on my ankle, which I don't even know how that happened, but yeah. I mean, I do know, I just didn't put sunscreen everywhere, so.
Yeah. But why a triangle? I don't know.
I know, maybe there's messages coming to me from this weird sunburns.
Well, that's fun. Happy birthday to your daughter.
Yeah. It's interesting because, things are quite samey, because the way we're living our lives at the moment. And so it was a lot of excitement.
That's good.
It did mean by 9 a.m. I felt like I needed to have a nap, because we'd been all up since 7, like freaking out about the birthday.
You gotta wake up early on your birthday.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm doing the quote this week.
Oh, yes. Go for it.
Okay. And there's like 2 reasons why this came up for me. So it's Isabel Allende, and she wrote a book that is one of my major comfort books, called The House of the Spirits. Okay. She wrote like a bazillion other books as well. But it is so good, and I just reread it. Because did I tell you I'm just on a kick at the moment where I can only reread books?
Oh, yeah. I think you mentioned that on here.
Because like the news everything else is very surprising. I don't want any other surprises, so I'm just rereading stuff. And I kind of realize I'm rereading stuff only by female authors, like not on purpose, but now that I've sort of noticed it, the one I'm rereading now is Margaret Atwood. But anyway, so her quote is, The longer I live, the more uninformed I feel. Only the young have an explanation for everything. And I think this came up for me because my husband found a Pearl Jam CD. And we
Okay.
just, because that's what we have in the car as a CD player. And we were listening to it. And I haven't really listened to this one album for like 20 years or something. And it just, like music, because you're a musician, but it's so evocative. And it just put me back in that teenage headspace of just being so adamantly sure about absolutely everything and
How
knowing
fun.
absolutely everything. And it's just so weird, like how much more. And even when my daughter, like sometimes you're talking to her about things and she's like, no, but it's either right or wrong and that's it. And you're like, oh, I remember that. Like when you knew everything. And so, yeah. So that
How
was
interesting.
yeah. But she and Isabel Allende is like she's an author, but I'm 100% sure she has taught many classes. So I'm sneaking her in as a professor.
That's totally reasonable. Sounds like a mentor.
Yes.
And that's very
definitely.
wise words.
Definitely. Okay, so do you want to talk? Should we sort of like define a little bit what we mean by sponsored programs?
Yeah. So we were thinking of sharing some of our experiences with our sponsored programs office, which is called Sponsored Programs Foundation. So if we say that, that's what we mean. And they help with identifying potential opportunities for us to apply for, understanding the different requirements of the different funding sources and helping us meet them, drafting proposals, budget, text, and then keeping track of funding and paperwork after we get an award. Other things that you want to add, Ruth?
Well, I was saying, like, for me, it's 90% just like emotional support, like holding my hand and being like, it's okay, like trying to like jolly me across the line. So yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
So what's working for you with sponsored programs?
Well, for me, so right now I'm about to submit this grant tomorrow.
Woohoo! Congratulations!
I know, dude.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's so weird because like I'm kind of like woohoo, I'm nearly done, and then I'm like, I'm not done. I have this whole paragraph to write. Like it's just I'm flip flopping between feeling elated and feeling despair, but I'm super stoked on it. And I think what worked for me this time, it reminded me of this talk that I just saw at the AAPT where this woman studied students who had failed the first physics course and were repeating it, and like what made them successful the second time. And it was so interesting. And she had like kind of a case study of one girl in particular who sort of described what she did the first time and then the second time. And the second time, this was in a huge, large lecture, but she came in and sat in the front row every time and like really connected with the professor and went to office hours and did all these things differently and formed a study group and all of this stuff. And I feel like it should be mandatory reading for every student ever who's taking anything. And especially when it's in students' own words, it's so powerful.
Sure.
Yeah. So this time I feel like I embrace the process a lot more of working with sponsored programs. And we both have the same pre-award specialist called Pia, who is amazing and wonderful. And that's the person who really takes you through the whole grant writing process and is in charge of the routing, which, if I'm really honest, I still don't totally know what that means. But anyway, she is the person in charge of that. And so I worked with them previously on a different grant 2 years ago. And I feel like my attitude before was very, oh God, I hope nobody contacts me about this. And I hope I don't, like I was sitting down the back of the class and kind of waiting until I couldn't get away with not doing it.
I see.
Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
This time I feel like I was much more proactive. And I think I even emailed her first and was like,
oh, nice.
Hey, can we like go through, let's start with the budget. And I feel like I was much more, yes, let's do this. And we should meet this time and that time. And that was a lot more like I embraced the process.
Cool. That's awesome.
Partly like the material for this grant, I was a little more excited about it. And then, I think I just also didn't want it to be like pulling teeth this time. I kind of got a little bit more into it. And that's so lovely. I think that helped. And I started a lot earlier. And so I think that also helped.
Yeah. I love it.
But it's still a mad scramble at the end, no matter what.
Sure.
Yeah. But so what about you? What's working for you?
Similar. Lots of interaction with the pre-award specialist. And a lot of things that I wouldn't have expected the Sponsored Programs Office and the Pre-Award Specialist to help with, they do help with. So I guess one tip I have is ask whether they can help with all kinds of things. So yeah, I ask this wonderful Pre-Award Specialist. We have so many questions during the writing process, and I ask her to read so many drafts. And just, yeah, it's so helpful to have an expert in the proposal writing process to help figure things out. And that can be, what's allowed in the budget for this particular grant, eligibility requirements, and do I meet them? And then also reading drafts from the perspective of an expert, does this come across persuasively or not? Or does it make sense? A lot of the times it turns out I thought something was perfectly obvious, but it did not come across in the writing, and so that's excellent. So I want to say, if your university doesn't have such an office or such a helpful person in the office, there are people you can hire to help with the grant writing process. Yeah. And also there's colleagues and friends that you can talk to get the does this make sense kind of things. Yeah. So I highly recommend lots of people being involved in your grant.
And that really, like, that's something that was really different for me this time too, because last time I was like Gollum with my Precious and like not wanting anyone to read it until I thought it was actually good. And I gave it to Pia way earlier and was like, hey, can you check this out? And it feels like I might die from embarrassment about it, but then it's better. And then I took and I got you to read it, which it was so weird because I was like, hey, so can you read this? And then immediately I was about to be like, actually, just don't worry about it. Don't read it. Like, it was just like so awkward. But then you read it and you gave me amazingly insightful commentary. And so, yeah, it was super helpful, but it's so hard. And I just don't think, for me, in my experience, I just don't think I learned enough about the writing process in my education.
Oh, okay.
Like, that it is this iterative process. You're supposed to write a rubbish first draft and then somebody reads it for you. And that just wasn't part of my understanding of how it works. So I think I'm kind of coming to terms with that more.
And it makes, like, I can see the logic because I've thought it before. Like, let me get it as good as I can get it before I give it to anybody. But on the other hand, giving somebody that really rough draft when you know it's not done is really helpful at that point, actually, because then they can say what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and you can incorporate that into the nicely polished draft, So, yeah, I completely agree, and I've had the same thing where I send off the proposal for somebody to read, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't actually read it or something. But
I know.
But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think like that's, this time I was just a lot more into doing that and realizing, because it's kind of energizing when you get the comments back and you can feel yourself slowing down, and then once you get the comments you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go and do that stuff. And so it's yeah, and
it's really tangible stuff to work on at that point. You're like, oh, they didn't get this part, let me go write that part better, or whatever.
Totally. Yeah.
And then also oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Also, things about the budget, like, I don't know how, benefit costs work and stuff. And so that's the kind of another aspect that I really value the Sponsored Programs Office for. Like, ours at least had a spreadsheet, and I was told by somebody to ask for the spreadsheet that you put your expenditures in, and it just calculates out, oh, and with these, indirect costs and these benefits, it adds up to this amount you have to ask for. And I didn't even know that was a thing. So,
oh my God, you're so much more advanced than me, because I'm literally like have to meet with Pia, and then she fills in the spreadsheet, but she's like, what do you need for this? Because to me, the budget is terrifying. That's like such a huge activation barrier. And so this summer, that was the thing I did first. I was like,
oh, great idea.
I'm going to meet the budget head on, because I'm terrified of it. I don't know why, but it just feels like I have no idea what's reasonable. Can you ask for like 1 million hours to work on something, or like what, so it's
yes, and that's another thing they can tell you is, what is the normal summer salary? Like, do you ask for 3 months or 1 month, or like what's normal in areas that they're experienced with? Totally.
And I feel like I kind of, Pia just does such a great job of being like really receptive to everything and not kind of like, you thought what, how could you possibly think that, like she's just, and she's like, I went to her with this grant where I was like, hey, so I was like at this conference and I'm having all these feelings and thoughts, and she literally was like, okay, what you're saying is you want to do this is the kind of
Oh, how
funding agency,
helpful.
because I had no idea, is this even a thing that people could ever do through a grant? And so
Right.
she figured it out for me and told me. And so it's super helpful just to talk to someone who can like crystallize these nebulous
Totally.
ideas that you're having. And yeah, I felt really like a really took advantage of that this time. I feel
Totally.
like last time I was still like kind of embarrassed about not knowing what the hell I was doing and sort
Totally.
of not, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you have a sponsored programs office with an awesome person like Pia, I would say take advantage of it. But if you don't, find somebody to fill the role, because it is huge. I agree.
And I think it says this kind of nonsense though that like we're supposed to just know how to do this.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
it felt like to me like, yeah, maybe you're just gonna sit down and write this like amazing grant without ever, and it's just completely total
Right.
nonsense. Like this just can't be true, right? But it feels like it's true and other people just know instinctively how to do
Right.
this sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you working on with working with sponsored programs?
I think one thing I was working on is like, again, it did all kind of end up as a bit of a scramble at the end, and so
Mm-hmm.
there was
For
that a little
submitting.
bit. Yeah, and I think the other thing, partly like, even though I say I'm embracing the process, sometimes I'm like, oh, like I kind of don't want to hear about a thing that I could do because then I might have to do it and I don't have time to do it, sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
And then not with Pia because I think we have like a relationship now, but sometimes I can be a real baby about comments.
Oh, I
Do you know
know,
what
me
I
too.
mean? And not with you. You literally and Pia, like you write these comments that are so like, "Hey friend, so just a thought, you could maybe do it." Like you're really good at like framing those, but sometimes with other ones, I'm like, "Man, you're kind of hurting my feelings," but it's not obviously, and it is all
Right.
super helpful feedback. So I
And it's hard,
think I need to
through
not be a
text,
baby.
it's hard to convey that you're just saying I
Oh
didn't
yeah,
understand this part, but it comes off. Yeah, so I know what you mean. You have to have a tough
yeah.
skin while reading your comments from people.
Right. And then, like, I don't know what the flip side is. Like, I wouldn't want people to not say that this wasn't
Right.
clear. Do you know what I
Of
mean? So,
course.
obviously, yeah. But I
Yeah.
think just toughening up and being like, oh, great. Thanks. That's great input or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's definitely better to hear, oh, this is not working right now. You need to tighten this up. Because otherwise, if I heard, oh, it sounds good, I'd be like, oh, great, done, ready to
Oh,
submit, and
totally.
that's not right. Of course it's not ready to submit. So, yeah, I know
Well,
what
I
you
had a
mean.
kind of a experience. I don't know why it suddenly hit me, but it was when I was doing job application letters and somebody, I was like, no, I'm good. Don't, no, no, I don't need anyone to read it. And they were like, do you want the first people to read it to be the ones who are deciding to give you an interview? And I was like, oh, you are making a very valid point and I
That's
will
a
get
good
over
point.
myself and let you read it. So yeah, but it's harder to have peers and people you know or might interact with read it.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get mad at people like, "No, it's good. What are you talking about?" But
Oh yeah, and
obviously it's
like
going to be better if I resolve whatever you've noticed.
totally, because Eric normally like he that's his job is like doing writing stuff in a good way, and we've had some serious arguments where I'm like, why are you hurting my feelings? And he's like, I'm not. I'm just telling you to change this sentence, but
Uh-huh.
somehow I feel very committed to whatever the sentence was, even though I'm totally not. But I'm like, no, this is the best way to say it. But
Uh-huh.
yeah,
I
yep,
think
yep.
time too is helpful. Read the comments. I like to read the comments and then like go away, and then come back
Oh
later
yeah, I like
to
that.
say,
Yeah,
"Oh, okay. Yes, okay. I can make that paragraph more clear
yeah,
now that I think about it."
totally. Yeah. And so tell me, what about you? What are you working on?
I'm working on forms, and in particular, leaving enough
Oh,
time with forms for my errors with them to be sorted out before problems happen. um,
I I can't with forms. I just can't. I'm so bad at forms.
I know, and my lovely post-award specialist has so often called me and said, okay, I found this form that you submitted. There's this problem. I have a solution. And she's just so good about coming up with the solutions to my form problems. But it'd be much better if I either asked her early enough to avoid the problem or submitted it. So anyway, like one example is I filled out a stipend form, to give a stipend to my summer research student. And I filled it out right in the nick of time, It was going to go through and he was going to be paid immediately. That was the plan. But it turned out that for the particular grant, I should have used a different form. I should have hired him hourly, and that was just, nitty-gritty details about what I'd put in the budget. So that's just my particular issue. But the point is, if I'd submitted the form earlier or asked if I was doing it right earlier, then it could have all been sorted out right before I wanted to pay my student. So anyway, that's just one example of the many times that my post-award specialist has called me to bail me out of some form situation I got into.
Do you think they have some kind of room where they can go scream or something? Because they literally, every time with me, and they'll give me the form back and be like, here's the 5 things you didn't fill in. And I'm like, great. And then I'll hand it back and they're like, here's 2 more. Like somehow you feel like it was like, okay. And like they even put like helpful Post-its on it. And
I know.
I don't know what it is with me in forms. I just don't pay attention to things properly.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened a lot where I'll have a nice conversation. I think I understand how the form works. But then it turns out I missed something. So anyway, I need to get better with forms, which I think, I need to, I think I pay enough attention while filling them out, but I don't know enough about when the form, I don't know. I just need to leave more time because there's inevitably going to be something I did wrong on the form that needs to be sorted out.
Well, and they're so infinitely patient and so kind.
I'm very thankful
they're so
for our
lovely.
Particular people.
So nice. But then I find like a lot of words feel really similar. Like there's the project number and the fund number and the other number, and they all might be the same number, but I know they're not, but I just don't know which one is which. And
yeah. Totally. But I mean,
forms
again, they're super helpful. So I guess this is maybe the same advice I had for anyone listening that I had for the working, is just communicate with them and ask them for help, because they can give more help than I originally thought they could,
Yeah, but I like that, like totally, like kind of, even just for me, I think this time, like recognizing what a resource it is and really like utilizing that instead of being like, oh God, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I don't know this. Just being like,
right,
how do you fill in this form? And so
yeah,
cool,
totally
cool. And then because you have a couple of grants, and maybe I will have a grant in the future, who knows.
Totally.
That would be exciting.
Yeah, and I just got an email from Sponsored Programs Office the other day saying it's your 90 days warning until your grant is expired, and this is reminding me that I should talk to my post-award specialist about what exactly does that mean. What should I get done for that, before it's 2 days before.
Yeah. Do you apply for like are you going to get a renewal, or are you going to?
I guess I need to think about that. I'm not sure. I've thought about whether I'd like to renew it. I haven't decided yet. I guess why not? But it depends on if I have stuff I want to do afterwards, I guess.
Cool.
All right.
So
go ahead.
As we're coming to the end, can we do the call to the people who are listening?
Please do.
So I guess we got a really cool, interesting question, a follow-on question from something we talked about in an episode, and we would love to have an episode that is about listener questions and listener mail. And so if people out there in the world could contact us, if you have any general questions or ideas, or if there's something that we mentioned that you'd like to hear more about, anything like that, we would love to get a whole bunch of questions and then do an episode that is answering some of those questions.
Yeah. And so to reach us, as always, it's contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com, and we would love to hear from all of you.
Cool. We're super looking forward to getting some emails.
Yes. All right. Thanks so much, Ruth.
Thanks, Claire.
And thanks, Ralph.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.